Tell us about your international activities in terms of attempting to make arrangements in other countries, whether it be sponsorships, the fight channel, the fantasy sports. You're attempting to deal with international players. Is there a difference in terms of your approach in these various different jurisdictions?
Yeah, again, you have to do your homework and try to understand as much as you can about the culture and the society you're dealing in, because they are very different from themselves and from, obviously everybody's different from the way we deal with things. I used to, if I had the time, I would always go to the Canadian Consul General, Canadian Embassy, find the local office of Ernst & Young or Deloitte, one of the big accounting firms, and find, if I could, a local office of a North American law firm. Because the people there will typically be people who have lived in that country. They're either from that country, but they're very Canadianized, or because they've been dealing all the time with North Americans and Canadians, or they're people who are Canadian who have been living in that country for a long time. And if I couldn't find a Canadian, I would always find an American because it was close enough. So you go and you meet those people. And they give you the lay of the land, and they just say, "Don't do this, don't say that. This is how people deal in this country."
And you found that you get good quality information from our embassies?
Absolutely. The Canadian trade offices, in every Canadian embassy or consul, there's a trade commissioner whose job, I know they've scaled back, of course, but there's usually someone whose job is to facilitate Canadian businesses, Canadians doing business. And also, you can Google any Canadian that's doing business there. I remember when we were going to in Turkey, it's a little harder to figure out how to do business in Turkey. Not a lot of literature on it. So again, I found there were some Canadian mining companies and who do business a certain way too, but differently from the way a media company might. But you find there's a way to just find Canadians who are active in the country. There's always a business council, Turkish Canadian Business Council, China Canadian Business Council. So those folks will always know, give you that lay of the land. So you just get a PhD in that country as much as you can.
That's a very innovative way to do your preparation.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like, and you get it from Canadians because you get from Canadians who, from their perspective, they can tell you what you're thinking. They can help you interpret the way things you would see the same way. And so, whereas if a Turk came and said to you, "This is how we do things," you might not understand what they're saying, because that's the whole point, is you don't know what they're saying. The Canadian will tell you, "No, when he or she says this, they really mean that." And the biggest thing in the international world is most countries don't have the word no in negotiations. They're very afraid to say no.
Why is that?
It's just cultural. I mean, it's probably I don't want to generalize here. I'll get killed probably, but most Asian cultures are much more genteel. They're not crusty New York Wall Street bankers. It's just not polite to say no. So they have different ways of saying no, and the same thing happens in South America. I have a hilarious story of being an interpreter, actually, trying to help two people.
Please share it with
I was trying to acquire ATV in Hong Kong, one of the 2 Hong Kong TV stations. I was with a guy named Jerry Noble, who was a Canvas executive, and we had an interpreter, and so I laid out all the reasons for the purchase price being, in that case, $100 million. And I thought it was the most cogent, brilliantly executed treatise on why our valuation was exactly correct. That's what we should pay for this asset. So he, and I don't know if this is going to be culturally insensitive, but and this is my imitation of Chinese, he went, "Hi, hi, hi," and he just started speaking in Chinese, but pounding the table and this and that and swinging his arms wildly. And the interpreter looks at me and said, "Mr. Liu says no." And that was it. 15 minutes of that. And I said, "I think he said a lot more than no." and she said, "I will tell you later." So Jerry went out and found out what the real thing was. But when there's an interpreter, that's one interesting way, because you don't really know what happened. You're totally reliant on the translator to tell you what happened. But the other one was in Chile when we had a negotiation, and they said yes, 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 and we walked out of the room, and nothing happened. And we got a document back that contradicted everything they'd said. We said, we thought we had an agreement. We thought you said yes, 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 everything. No, if you sit there, if you lean forward and say yes, that's no. That means if you're back and you say yes, it's a more, if you lean forward and say yes, that means no. So
that was the custom.
What we learned was in Chile, they have 5 ways of saying yes, and 4 of them are no. Period.
So the body language
they just would never say no. They would never say, it's just not polite. So, but the body language is what you have to read. So
and did you eventually get it?
Eventually figured it out. And we did do the deal. And we bought the station, and we became good friends with the people, and it was great.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Tell us about some of the characteristics that you think are important in terms of your own experience to be a good negotiator.
Well, I think you have to have patience. You have to be. I mean, there are personality characteristics, and there are tactics you have to use. Just in terms of tactics, I mean, I think you have to. I said earlier, you have to know what you want, what you can give. But one thing I found two very effective things. One is a rule that you should always try to remember, which is never give something without getting something back in return. So every time someone says to you, oh yeah, I just want this, you say, well, oh, that reminds me, I wanted that. Because that will give them pause. If they know every time they try to grind you that it's going to cost them, you're going to come back with something, it's less likely to happen. Because what typically happens in a negotiation is you agree on the 6 points, and then they start grinding you for things, adding new things. So the segue from that is you should always say to the person across the table from you, hey, don't give me things piecemeal. I want to see the whole package. Because what a lot of people do is they get you to agree to something, one thing, and you don't give anything away. You don't get anything back for it. And then they go, oh yeah, next day you come, oh, that reminds me, one more thing. And I always use my house example because it's so simple. One day they say, well, look, we're going to keep the chandeliers. And you go, you agree to that? And you go, and they say, oh, one more thing. We think that bathtub we really love. We're going to take that too. Meanwhile, you've agreed on a payment for all the furniture. You say you're buying the house for X and you're paying Y for the furniture, and next thing you know, suddenly the house is empty. And instead of them, what you should have said is, no, give me a list of everything you want to take from the house. And that's it. Once you're finished with that list, that's it. Don't bring it up again.
But that goes to agenda.
Yes.
When you enter negotiations, are you prone to get everything on the table sooner as opposed to later in terms of what's going to be negotiated or not negotiated?
Yeah, I like to do that. Everybody has a different style, but I like to say, I like to be very upfront with someone. I say, this is what I want. This is what I want out of this negotiation. And you tell me what you want. And let's see if there's a deal. If there's not, okay. But let's get it all out. Everybody put everything they want out on the table. And you know that they're going to have some that they can give, and they know you're going to have some that you can give. And you just whittle away and you get to the core. But I think you have to, in terms of traits, you have to be patient. You have to be a good listener. And you have to be able to read what someone is really saying as opposed to what they are saying.
On the agenda formation, would you, I think you indicated that you would send back the email if they continuously interrupted you. But as you move forward with the deal, it would be because you've been so successful, it would be your desire to have all of the items out in front. So whether it's 5 items, 10 items, 15 items, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You'd want to have that out first.
I would, yeah.
And that's worked very well for you.
Yeah, and I think bringing them out later has worked badly because it creates a sense of mistrust. Because if you didn't tell me something now, I mean, how many more are you holding back? When is this ever going to be over? And it creates a sense, and then that creates this, well, I'm not going to give this. The other guy's going to say, I'm not going to agree to this unless I hear everything you've got sitting in your backpack that you're going to pull out. Because I'm just going to keep getting ground down.
Share with us how you operate with multi-stakeholders. I mean, here you are, the chairman, CEO of different companies. You have a variety of different stakeholders. How do you deal with these different stakeholders?
I think it's just communicate with them. I always find that the problems develop over lack of communication, just lack of calling someone up and saying, hi, how are you? So you have to have a list of who are the stakeholders, you know. Check in with the board, check in with the people running divisions, check in with executives, check in with clients, check in with, and just have almost like a spot check with everybody. And I mean, there's formal communication in any corporation. There are board reports and, you know, compliance reports you might have to file with the CRTC or the bank, or in the CRTC in our case, the regulators. But
I think what I'm hearing you say is that you have many stakeholders.
yeah,
There's a formal communications, which
yeah,
everyone has to do, but more importantly, over and above that, there's the informal communications.
Yes.
In terms of regular contact,
yeah,
phoning up.
yeah, yeah. Now look, the job of a CEO is to manage all those relationships and to most importantly sense if there's something going wrong, because you can write a report to the board, but then you find out one board member is kind of steaming, you know, quietly. I mean, they're busy. They have a lot of things to do. They might not send you a 3-page memo back saying I don't like this deal, but they don't, and they are kind of maybe, you know, they're a little unhappy about something. They call another board member who calls another board member, and suddenly you've got a problem. So I find that, you know, preemptive communications to sense out if there's going to be a problem, or to find opportunities too. You know, we have this guy in Alabama who runs the hunting and fishing channel, and you know, it's going well. It's going great. Why would I need to talk to him? But I do, because every time I talk to him, I find that he's thinking a lot about opportunities, about things we can do together. There's things he's working on that could help our channel up here, and so you sense out problems before they happen and become big problems, and I think you find opportunity by just talking to people. I think you never make money or do well sitting behind your desk doing emails. You've got to be out there talking to people.
Would you, in terms of formal versus informal, where would you come down on in terms of being the most effective in managing the multi-stakeholders?
I don't know if I'd want to rank them, but I think, David, I just think you have to do both, because the informal can't take place without the formal, because the board members or bankers or executives and employees and everybody have to know the facts and have a certain information level before the informal communication can have value. Because you can't go all the other way and say, hey, I'm just going to randomly call the board and randomly deal with people in the company, you know, once in a while when they don't know what's going on, because the conversation won't have any meaning for them.
So it's not an either-or.
No, it's not. It's really a package of things you have to do. You have to be specific about the information, make sure everybody knows as much information as they possibly can. So then you top that up. You know, the icing on the cake is that I think gets you is a differentiator. You see, maybe only 10% of it, but it's the important 10%.
Share with us, if you will, in terms of if you were advising students, for instance, in trying to get a job, in terms of trying to promote a particular project, what advice would you have for students who are trying to enter the marketplace, either in a capacity as a full-time job or a proposal that they might have for a business or for a government?
Well, I have one pet peeve that I start with, which is if I ever see a resume that has a grammatical error on it or a typo, I will say, I don't even want to see you. Because if you've had days and days to make this resume or the CV and you can't get it right, you know, when you're under pressure and you have time sensitivities, you will not get things right. And I believe that, you know, when I see a document from, you know, someone does a PowerPoint or something, or anything, like when I'm in a work environment and they make mistakes like that, I think the message to me is that person is not careful. That person is not buttoned down. And I'm not sure I want to do business with that person. So when I see a CV like that, I say, if you had all this time, and if you're not perfect at English, you weren't I get it if it's not their first language, I get that, but if you're not even an English student, get somebody to check it. Like, just get a few people to check it, at least make that first impression well. The second thing is do your research. Look like you've come in to that job interview and you care about this company. You know what this company does. You know how you know as much as you can from the outside about how it makes its money. You know how it is successful, and just, Google is there's so many search engines. It's so great. You can find out everything. And if you can't find out everything, at least be inquisitive. Start asking the person who's, instead of being interviewed, maybe do a little bit of interviewing yourself. I'm always impressed when people start putting me on the spot and saying, why should, and not in an arrogant way, but just maybe, why do I want to work for you? So
Where does passion fit in?
it's big. I always do make some allowance for the fact that not everybody in the world is passionate, and some people are just stay at home. They just work hard and they're great, but not everybody can be passionate. It helps if you can show. That's why I say if you can show quiet interest. It doesn't have to be pounding the table. But I've always had a rule that in terms of the job, the person who I can glean wants it the most will get that job, other things being equal. And even if they're 5% behind in terms of the quality, I'll because I know that I'll get more out of that person.
One of the things that you mentioned early on in the interview here was concessions and concession strategy.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you think about that as you enter into a negotiation? Is it part of the things that you have to check off in terms of your approach to a particular negotiations? I know I'm going to have to give up something. What are you prepared to give up?
I don't go in already planning to give something up. I do make it, that's why I say the list is more what I must have and what I would like to have, and I go for the whole thing. So it's only when you get pushed, or at least for me, that I react, and I go back and I look and say, well, maybe I don't have to have this. And sometimes a must-have can fall off the list if you've got something else you didn't anticipate getting, because it's not very linear that way. Negotiations take twists and turns, and suddenly, you got something you didn't expect to get. Suddenly you feel good you're okay about giving this up or that up. So it is a little bit reactive. It's like, it's even I learned this in combat sports. The fighters will tell you there's the game plan, and then there's what happens after the first punch. Because as soon as you're bleeding and you've been punched, suddenly everything changes. So in a negotiation, a lot changes. You go in with a certain set of premises and theories and theses about how it's going to go, and somebody says something that just takes a left turn and an off ramp, and suddenly you're in a different discussion. You want to try to keep it back to where you got to keep focused. That's why you have your list of what you want to get, but things can change.
Do you go into negotiations with a bottom line, and are you prepared to walk?
Yes, you have to be. You have to, even if you really, really want something, you have to, at least I'm not a good enough actor to fake walking. I have to really want to walk away. And that's when I'm my most convincing. And so I've always believed that the bus comes every 15 minutes. And if you conduct yourself that way, that no deal, if you miss the bus, there's another one coming every 15 minutes, so that you can afford to wait and catch the next bus. And even though it looks like, I've found now, 15 years ago I couldn't have said this, 10 years ago, that if you miss, there were deals that I thought I had to have, I just had to have, and I was willing to give away more than I wanted to, necessarily to get it. Now I'm absolutely convinced that, having had experience, having missed a deal, and thought the world was ending, and then found 5 years later, 2 years later, 2 minutes later, something else came along. You can now say, I can now go into anything saying I can walk away.
But do you, in terms of your negotiations, do you consciously say, I'm entering this negotiations, this is my bottom line, I'm going in, and if the other side is not prepared, I'm out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I do, but I think you always have to be prepared to change that, because you might find that something else happened, as I say, that you got something you didn't anticipate. So when you say bottom line, there can be some things that are part of that package, because it's not just one bottom line. I mean, you can say it on a purchase price. You can say, I'm not paying a penny over this price, and that's easy to walk away from. But there are a lot of qualitative things that you're looking for in a negotiation, that you might, you can say, go in saying I'm not, that's my bottom line. But then when you look at the overall package, that's when you have to assess it's a good deal or a bad deal. So I think you have to be a little bit flexible. You can, on purchase prices, say that's it. But again, if someone says I'll give you the house for, but I'm charging you more, but I'm giving you a loan, I'll give you a 50-year take-back mortgage, and all these other terms are really great. Hey, maybe in the overall equation, it worked.
So share with us, because you also mentioned patience. You have a concession strategy. You have your established goals. How patient have you been in these different processes that you've been involved with? And is patience important?
Yeah, I think it's, to a degree, it's important. I don't want to overemphasize it, because at some point, impatience is good too. You have to, because if someone senses there's too much patience, they will take advantage of it. So you have to remember that, don't get angry early, but if things aren't going your way, but don't let yourself get beaten up too badly either. At some point, you have to be impatient and say, I've had enough. I'm out. You want to, you've taken advantage of my civility, and I'm out.
Has there been anybody in your career who's impressed you as a negotiator, or in all your various?
Yeah, I think I mentioned Peter Viner earlier. I think he's one of the best people at getting what he wants that I've ever seen, and I say he kills them with kindness, but he's firm when he has to be. He's a great actor, so he's one of those people that can actually walk away, look like he's upset, walk away when he still really wants the deal. My father did it a different way. He was much more transparent, but yet he would, and I saw that worked well, because again, the person across the table would say, oh, he told me what he wants, he told me what's important to him, and he never changed from that. He never threw in something from the side later. He never tried to renegotiate or whatever. He just laid it all out, and I can deal with this guy. So a lot of people wanted to deal with him. Another example, though, I like is Jerry Schwartz of Onyx, and because he's just so disciplined. He is that guy that can walk in and say, I want this, this, and this, and this, and if I don't get it, I'm gone. And that creates another mood, which is, I'm from the other side that I'm going to lose this deal if I don't give him what he wants. So,
has the era of your dad, who had a tremendous reputation in all sorts of circles, of this being upfront, very transparent, very candid, is that dissipating, you're finding, in the business world today?
No, I don't think so. I think humans are the same and have been in some ways for centuries or thousands of years. I mean, I think but different people respond different ways. And that's why some deals get done and some deals don't. In some cases, my dad's style will work. It's not a question of what era, it's a question of with whom he's dealing. So his style might work with some people. Jerry's style might work with other people. Peter Viner's might work with others. Ted Rogers had a great style. I mean, he would flatter you. I mean, he would
Tell
flatter
us about that.
Ted, I've been a few with him. He would flatter you so much, and then you'd think you're going to get the greatest deal from him, and then he would sort of slip in something and he would say, what did he say? Did I just lose a lot of, did I just like walk away without my left arm? And my leg's missing too now. And so, but he was also that way, he was very much like my father in the sense that he said, this is what I want, this is why I want it, so you know why I'm asking. It's another thing people used to do is, I think if people sense that people are being irrational, they're just saying it to be, and there's no logic behind what they're asking. People don't react well to that. And I think if you say, this is what I need, this is why I need it, I think that works very well. And Ted did that a lot.
Is Len Asper a good prober? So when I would ask Len for something in a negotiation, would you probe me as to why I want it?
I do. I very much, again, I believe knowing what someone's about, where they're coming from, you know, why they're even at the table is vital to a negotiation. Because then you can, even if they don't tell you what's super important to them, you can glean it, or you go in knowing it. You know, knowing, especially when businesses are under financial pressures, or you know, there's some reason why they're there. There's some reason, so you just have to find out what that reason is. So you need to understand the personality you're dealing with, but also the corporate imperatives that are driving them to be at that table.
So would your style in terms of going in, negotiating for something, would you give an explanation in terms of the rationale as to why you're looking for A, B, and C? Or would you just state what A, B, and C is and wait for them to question?
I think, again, it's a little bit, I
nuance there.
wouldn't bear all. I mean, I don't think you necessarily go in and bear all, but I think if you meet resistance, I think you need to explain why this is important. I think that's what the time you bring out the, I must have this and here's why, so they don't think you're being obstinate or dogmatic. So I think there's a bit of a process to revealing things. It's not all, just throw it all on the table at once.
So now we'll probably conclude our interview with this question. You're now embarking upon some international travels for a variety of different interests. Will you use what you've done in the past in terms of preparing, for instance, the embassy, the various Canadian offices that may be, say, for instance, in Thailand or China? Will you operate in that venue, that way today as you move forward?
Yeah, I think I rely on it less now than I did then, because I've started and I now have had experience in a lot of these countries, and I know a broader group of people I can call to get a cross-section of opinions. But yeah, it's always a good place to start. I was going to tell you one funny story to wrap up, though, about Germany. So we were dealing with somebody, a big German company, and the word the Nazis used, if you may recall, was for the extermination of the Jews, was the final solution. That's what it was called. It was called the final solution. So we were dealing with this big German company, and we were trying to buy an asset from them. The CEO of this company, what he meant to say, we kept saying a certain thing. What he meant to say was, when we finish the deal. But his language, because he wasn't great at English, he said, when we reach the final solution. So I was sitting there with my father in the room, and we kept looking at each other across the table. And finally, at the end of he kept saying, when we reach the final solution, and in that language you see in movies, right? So anyway, he ultimately, finally, one of the other guys from the company came over and said, I don't think he means exactly what you think he did. So,
did you get the deal?
We did get the deal, yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want to thank you on behalf of the students at Ryerson University for giving of your time and some very interesting perspectives in terms of the negotiating process. And we want to thank you and wish you well and continued success in all your endeavors.
Well, thank you very much, David. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.